Visual art was very important to the Northern Renaissance, just as it was for the Italian Renaissance. So I want to show you a few important artists and styles of art to notice and to help you compare the Northern Renaissance to the Italian Renaissance. One of the most famous early Northern Renaissance artists was Albrecht Durer. Durer was German, and he came down and studied in Italy. Already by his time, he was fairly well known in his own country and in the Holy Roman Empire and the German world. But he wanted to figure out, how everyone down in Italy was doing their own art and what he could learn. And he brought back a lot of the early Renaissance style. You can see in this self-portrait the distinct geometric shape and balance, how he sort of forms this perfect triangle with his head and his hair. But he also brought his own style. You can see this is not a fresco like you'd see in a lot of Italian art, but rather he uses oil paints. Oil paints were a new innovation. They were developed in northern Italy, but they really came to the rest of Europe during this northern Renaissance. And the advantage of oil paints over tempera, which is what they were using earlier in the Renaissance, is they dry very, very slowly. And they're semi-translucent. So you can see this great amount of detail that Durer has in say, the hair. That takes a lot of layers of paint to do. Durer also did a common style of art in Northern Europe called woodcuts or engravings. So he would take a block of wood or a piece of metal and carve out an image on it, and then stamp that image into ink and put it on paper, and then you've got this nice piece of art. And the advantage here was, as an artist, you could make lots and lots of copies of this and make more money. But it was a distinct style of art that you see common in Northern Europe. Durer also was well known for his portraits, like this one here of Emperor Maximilian I. And he also wrote a book. It's called Four Books in a Human Proportion. I guess it's 4 books. In any case, he really studied, like Da Vinci or Michelangelo did, how to draw and how to sketch people to get as detailed as and accurate as possible. And you can see here in just the study of hue and foot how many different angles and measurements he takes on it. Another center of Northern Renaissance art was Flanders, and today what we call the Netherlands. And one of the important Flemish artists was Jan van Eyck. He came from a family of painters. 2 of his brothers were painters, I think even one of his sisters. But he's the best known of his family. You can see the great amount of detail in this part from the Ghent Altarpiece, which was a triptych he did as a commission for a church. Is a really good example of the amount of detail. Take a look at this painting. This is from an image called the Arnolfini Marriage, the Arnolfini Portrait. And it was done for a young Dutch couple that had gotten married in the Netherlands. And this is a pretty common style of art. If you were from the upper middle class, you would, have one of these paintings commissioned when you got married. But there's a great amount of detail in here. First of all, there's a lot of symbolism. For example, this guy over here on the left, Mr. Arnolfini, he's a merchant due to his hat and also his cloak, but you look by the window where he's closer to the outside world, like where his shoes are painted, since that's his place as a man in society. He also has these oranges back here, so he's a importer of foreign goods. Mrs. Arnolfini is closer to the interior life, into the inside of the house. But as a good example of the amount of detail Van Eyck could put into his paintings, take a look at the mirror here in the background. If we were to get really close to that, you would see not only all these individual images on the outside of the mirror, but also you could even see the back of the room behind the painter, and the back of the Arnolfinis, and you can even see the bend of the mirror, and how it's convex shaped. So Van Eyck was really well known for the amount of detail he put into these oil paintings he did, and his portraits. Another well-known artist was Hans Holbein. Holbein was German, like Durer was, and his father was a portrait artist as well, but Holbein the younger was probably better known. Here you can see this portrait of the ambassador, so a couple noblemen, and you've got kind of a standard Renaissance portrait, some rich guys and all their cool stuff, but also you have this sort of unusual shape here at the bottom. Now, if we were to take this painting and imagine we were to turn it and rotate it at sort of an odd angle, what you would see is it's actually a skull. And it's painted in this weird sort of anamorphic angle so that it really only looks like a skull from a certain position. A lot of artists have sort of wondered about this, and their best guess is that this is an example of a memento mori, or a remembrance of death. This is a common style of art after the Black Death, just sort of a way to remind people, hey, that you're going to die someday. And the idea was maybe this was placed in like a stairwell, so that if you're headed up the stairs, you'd look up and you wouldn't see the painting directly, but you sort of see the skull sort of hanging out, almost hovering above you. Also, it was a way for Holbein to show that he really knew exactly how perspective worked. You can imagine how somebody, really only using a sketchbook and paintbrushes could plan how to create this image that you could only see from this particular angle. Another painter to know was Peter Bruegel. Bruegel was another Flemish painter, and this is an interesting painting. It's called Netherlandish Proverbs. He would take common sayings in Dutch, idioms that you and I might use today in English, things like it's raining cats and dogs, and then paint them literally. So you see a lot of things that are sorry, I don't know why that went forward. A lot of things that look kind of ridiculous here, but also there's some things to note is the amount of detail he pays attention to, even things in the background, and also the fact that this is showing, aside from the crazy stuff going on, it's really just a Dutch village. And another thing you see about Northern Renaissance art is often the focus is more domestic or rural life, things the everyday person would see, as opposed to just the upper class or classical art like we would see in the North.